Welcome everyone today. I'm talking with Jack Roney, who is a crime fiction writer, and I'm a mystery author, so I write amateur sleuth stuff because I have not been a detective, but you have been, so you have a very unique position for this, and I really just want to pick your brains apart for this. So please tell us a bit about your journey into becoming an author.
Sorry, I think we're having a bit of an internet lag there. Can you hear me
Oh
okay now?
no. Yes, yeah, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me okay?
I can now. We just had I don't know whether we need to do a take two. I'm sorry, but there was just a real lag there.
No, that's all good. I was just asking how you came to how did your journey into becoming a writer start?
Yeah, I'll try and give you the short version. I think I started writing probably over 20 years ago, secretly, very covertly, because at the time I was a child protection detective, and I was
Oof.
had experienced a number of cases that at the time I didn't really realise what effect they were having on me, and I always had this kind of burning desire to do some writing, but I never really had started typing any words. Or as a kid, I was always quite good at writing, but joining the police very young, straight out of high school, all my creativity kind of went out the door, and I focused on being a policeman. And then after a number of real life experiences, there was a particular homicide investigation I was involved with, where it was my job to interview the kids who had witnessed a homicide, and I was
Oof.
involved in a number of those sort of jobs. So because of my role, I just kind of felt like I wanted to express myself, and I kind of started writing just as a way to kind of vent the way I was feeling about the job I was doing, and so I used creative writing fiction as a way to really get a good sense of how I was feeling. And it wasn't until I look back retrospectively that I realized that that was my kind of self therapy, my way to really express um, and articulate the way I was feeling about the job that I was doing at the time as a child protection detective. And that's what got me writing. And then over the years, I started to try and develop the craft. And then it's only sort of been in more recent years that I've taken my writing a little bit more seriously.
Wonderful. I think that when I saw on your stuff that you were a detective, I was like, oh, that's really exciting. That's really cool. But child protective services, it's just a whole different field. I think that when you're dealing with adults, you're like, well, you've made choices and you've messed up. Now, here are the consequences. Or you can reason with them. You can check up on them in ways where you're like, okay, I can see this because I am an adult and I'm looking at another adult. But when it's children, there's so many still waters. You don't know what's happening underneath. You don't know what's going on inside their minds or what influences them, um, and to what extent. Some kids, everything, they've been through terrible experiences and it's like water off a duck's back. And others, you don't know where that's going to lead them in life. It's something we don't write about very often. I think that people will chuck a child in as nearly a prop without realizing their humanity. So,
Mhm.
and writing in itself is such an incredible way to clear the stuff that's happening within you when you're in a hard job like that. I
Yeah.
used to work in palliative care, and um, a lot of my stuff and my understanding comes around the gentleness of going into death. So it's a dark field, but it also makes you live life harder. It makes you live life more fully because you're so grateful for what you've got, and you know that it's not forever. So with that, writing helps to express that and move that through much in a similar way. Um, the
Mm.
arts in those areas are so important.
Yeah, and there's a quote from the author Neil Gaiman. It was along the lines of, "Fiction is the lie that tells the most truth." And so, for me, by writing
Oh, I
fiction, it's
love
my
that.
way of kind of using my fictional characters as a vehicle to tell a story about my personal experiences as a police officer and a police detective in that particular field. And so, as a result, my point of difference was that my detective in my crime series is a child protection officer. So
Beautiful.
he's
Write what you
he's not
know.
one of those hard. Exactly right, So he's not one of those hard-boiled detectives kicking indoors, action-packed. He's a quieter, more of a thoughtful sort of man. He's one of those guys that he he fell into that work and he became quite good at that work and dealing with kids and building rapport with street kids and young offenders, and also in the child protection world. So I really felt that was probably something that hasn't been done before in terms of a fictional crime story. So
Yeah,
I
absolutely not.
decided to do that, and so that's why I kind of feel that the stories that I've written, even though they are gritty, they're dark, and that to some extent they're police procedurals, but for me it's very much about the characters that Jared the detective comes across, and his journey as well. So it tells a different point of view. It breaks the mold of the cliche detective story.
And when I was working on cruise ships, you would see these old trashy paperback detective novels, right? A lot of them were procedural, a lot of them were just nearly try-hard mysteries. Oh, hello, we've got... What are you after, sweetheart?
We just went to the pool and I just swam across it again.
Okay, excellent. Well done. I'm in an interview. I'll come out later. My housemate's kids. They couldn't swim before they moved in here, and so they're really excited to tell me and show me that they can now swim back and forth across the pool, because they're not allowed. They have to have an adult in the water with them and they can't wrestle or play any, wrestly sort of games until they can swim confidently. So that was our rules. So it's very sweet that they want to come up and tell me how their progress is going.
Yeah.
So so one of the things that I found was really lacking in these older paperback detective novels was any form of characterization. It was like the characters were props. There was just a cardboard cutout that was detective shaped, and they got moved into situation to situation, and there was no personality. So to hear that you have endeavored to imbue that personality and that characterization within your stories it's really refreshing when it comes to mystery.
Yeah, and one of the learnings for me, the more I kind of research, writing and being more effective as a writer and a storyteller, is about using your character to drive the story. And even though a lot of police procedurals are about the police are solving a case and they're piecing together the evidence and it's forensic evidence and it's very procedurally driven. And you're right, a lot of these characters are very much cardboard cutouts. Whereas my learning has been, and this is sort of a message I deliver when I'm delivering my crime writing workshops to writers, is that you really need to use your characters. It's your characters that are the story, and their experiences and how it shapes them, how they overcome obstacles, and how their journey changes them from who they are at the beginning to who they are at the end. It may be they might be a detective solving a series of murders, but really the story should, to make it more powerful, it's not just about catching the bad guy. It's about what's going on in the world of the protagonist and how is that driving the story forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of becomes a bit more of a cozy mystery, or some brand of cozy mystery, when the character's own personal stuff is very separate from the case. I feel like with cozy mysteries and with more light-hearted mysteries, they might have an emotional drama or they might have a personal drama going on, but it gets solved through the case incidentally. It's not intertwined with the case. And the case really is there as nearly the backdrop of helping them fix an emotional problem or a more light-hearted issue. Whereas when you've got true crime and when you've got not so much true crime, but when you've got more gritty crime and noir stuff, that intermeshing, it folds in so beautifully.
Yeah, and what I would say to writers out there is to really think about your story and think about your plot and what is it that your protagonist is trying to achieve, but then spend some time thinking about who is the character and what's their story, what's their quirkiness, what's their point of difference, and really focus on building your character, make your character pop out of the page and make them someone that your reader will empathize with and want to share their journey. And for me, that was probably the real learning from taking a jump as a writer myself in terms of really focusing on the strength of your character and let them tell the story, and then the plot comes along with them. So it's not just about them solving the crime in the case of a police procedural.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Giving them personality means that it's memorable. It means that
Yes.
someone will resonate with the character. So you think of like some of the really good ones. We've got the Ladies Detective Agency behind me somewhere, and when you look at Midsummer Murders, when you look at any NCIS, it's or Criminal Minds, you attach to a character, you attach to someone's personality. If you're watching a TV show, you attach to someone you like the aesthetic of, and then the personality. But with those things, you actually feel like you're part of it. You feel like you're on the team, as opposed to just watching a documentary about how a fictional case got solved.
Yeah, and one of my favorite characters, whether it's on the film version or in the books, is the character Dexter. If
Oh
you've ever seen the
yes,
Dexter series.
I have Darkly Dooming Dexter somewhere up here.
Yeah, I just love the whole context of who he is as a character. Here he is, he's a forensic officer working for a police department, yet he's a killer. But the fact that the readers or viewers really he appeals to his followers is because he's killing bad people, and he's prepared to do that. The rest of us, he's prepared to do what the rest of us are not prepared to do, and we kind of, even though we know that he's ethically and morally doing things wrong, you can't help but love the guy because he's quirky, and he's always one step ahead of the other police, and you follow his story. And it's I just love that whole concept of who Dexter is and what motivates him.
I really like the perspective of when someone sees the world as if they are an alien looking in. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that Dexter offers us quite a lot. So he sees normal and mundane actions as quite bizarre because they don't make any sense to him. Like, why does someone do that? And for us, it's just normal. I think in the very first episode, in like the second scene or something like that, him and his girlfriend are cracking open crab shells with hammers, and he comments on how all of these normal and well-adjusted people come to bash the brains out of sea creatures as a form of recreational date night.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's trying to make sense of it. To him, it's what are these people doing? Yeah.
Um, did you see the last season, when like the last season, the extended season?
No, I haven't caught up. I still need to watch the last season.
Okay, all right. I won't give you any spoilers, but there's parts of Dexter that are a masterclass in characterization. And it is in Dexter, it's one of the better ones where you do see the characters pop out of the page. They have personality, they have phrases that they use constantly, and you can tell that Jeff Lindsay knows what's going on behind the characters that's not on the page. Like, he knows what they're afraid of, he knows what they will do to get what they want and what they won't do to get what they want. He's really in their lives as if he's seen them and has been as Dexter is, like just around them and observing them. And I think mystery lends itself to that really well. Just like you said, knowing what your characters are about is not just giving them that quirky line or dressing them up like a goth or something like that, like they do. You see that repeated quite a lot ever since NCIS popped up and became popular. But you see them, you know what's going on underneath, and that's what gives them body.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the point of view, whether it's in first person or it's third person. Depending on the narration, if you're reading a novel, and whether the person is expressing their thoughts, or you have to kind of make your judgments based on their actions and what they say. But I think these characters have to be believable. They have to have faults and weaknesses and self doubts, because then we can associate with those people. We can really resonate with their thoughts, because they're not the Jack Reachers of the world, who's big, muscly, and he's not scared of anything, and he's intimidated. He intimidates people because of his size and all that.
Yeah.
Where he's not in my view, he's not a believable character. Whereas I think people want to just read characters that are believable, that they're human. And that's what I've attempted to do as well. Again, sort of using my experience as a police officer and a detective to try and really paint an authentic picture as to what it's really like, and to try and break some of those tropes and cliches that you do often see in crime novels.
Yeah, absolutely. You just made me think actually about how characters having flaws and being believable in the Hannibal Lecter series, because the perspective is not from Hannibal in the first book, in first and second books. Um, it's not from Hannibal, so he is allowed to be this perfect being who has nearly superhuman powers because it's not from his perspective. This is how Clarice Starling sees him and how other people have seen
Mm.
him and reported what he is capable of. But Clarice Starling is faulted. She is flawed. And so she is the perspective we see it through. Even though she's a little bit more bland as a character, there's a level of bland enough to imprint on so you can be in their shoes when you're reading the story. But yeah, Hannibal
And
Lecter
also with
series is one of
Clarice,
my favorites.
yeah. And as you say, with Clarice, she might start off as being a bit of a bland character, but you can see her development from being a green FBI agent from the beginning
Mm,
to who she was at the end, and her courage and confronting the bad guy, single-handedly, and just to sort of rise above her fear. So you really
yes.
see that development as a person.
Yes, absolutely. And you see her in the books in particular. So the two books have a very different ending to the movies. The first one is
Mm-hmm.
nearly word for word with the book to movie. Like it's one of the most perfect book to movie adaptations that you can get. They were really true to it. But with the second one, the ending is completely different. And you also see, like in the first one, she gets built up, and there's a little bit of disillusion with the system on the restrictions put on her because of her being green. But she gets opportunities and she gets to move up the ranks. And then in the second one, it's about everything crashing back down, and her finding that the only person she can really trust and know is Hannibal. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so incredible, bizarre. This is a completely unique sort of story and remains so. Definitely one for art students.
Definitely. And, my favourite book out of that whole series, I think it's called the Hannibal Lecter Omnibus. There's the original 3-book series,
Mm.
is the book Red Dragon, which was actually the prequel to Silence of
Mm.
the Lambs. And
Mm-hmm.
it is brilliant. Anyone who loves classic dark crime thrillers, I can't recommend Red Dragon enough. It was an absolutely brilliant book to read. And the screen version was also awesome. So it's
Yes.
probably one of the most underrated books. It's in the shadows of Silence of the Lambs, but it's absolutely
Mm.
brilliant. So it's the sequel.
There's
Sorry, the
definitely
prequel.
yeah, that's the one where that's how Hannibal ends up in the prison that Clarice meets him in.
Yes.
Yeah, with Will. What's his last name? Will someone. Um, he's in the TV show, but honestly, just phenomenal writing as well, and insight. Again, the author of the Hannibal series, I can't remember his name for the life of me. Pulled Jeff
Is that Paris?
Lindsay. Oh yes.
I
Where is it?
have to Google.
I've got it right there somewhere. Harris, something Harris. Oh, it's there. I've got all of them, and I've got them on audiobook as well. But Harris, Harris and Jeff Lindsay both have a very unique perspective on humanity. And I think that they were really able to do that. It's akin to the book Perfume. Um, it's not a mystery or anything like that. It's about a guy who's got an insane sense of smell and goes on a murder spree. Um,
Mm,
so it's more of a literary one. They had a movie made of it with an all-star cast, and it's very bizarre. But it's about that really unique perspective that authors seem to be able to convey from reality to page and back into someone else's reality.
definitely. And I think it's fair to draw similarities between what you see on screen. Even if you are a writer, I think you can. It's great to read and see how the author presents and writes their prose and how they build suspense, and so on. But I think you can legitimately draw ideas from screen as well in terms of how these
Mm.
characters are developed. So I think there's a lot of transferable ideas between screen and the written form.
People don't realize as well, like we forget very quickly that screen was written. Screen is always written first. Very rarely, it's only if you've got something that's completely ad-libbed and improved that screen is not written. So most of the time, someone had to sit down and write that out and figure out what that was going to look like in their brain in order to transpose it to the screen. So you can look at screen the same way you can look at writing. It's all about how you convey that message.
Yeah, and clearly there's different tools and techniques to, between screen and the written form. But I guess that's where, as writers, that's where we start to hone the craft and say, well, how do we convey the same imagery and how do we build the tension in the written form? And that's really where the craft of writing comes in. Once you've got that idea, it's about making it believable and making it palatable for the reader.
Yes, yeah, because it makes me think of like the Scream movies where you get that eerie tension, you get the music and you get the silences, and then all of a sudden the phone will ring. And everything happens at the right pacing to give you the exact right feeling. And you can do the same thing with writing, but you have to know the techniques and you have to practice the techniques to get them right.
Exactly, yeah.
No, there's something. This is where you know you've got really good magic in your writing because you're able to convey these things like Jeff Lindsay does with Dexter or with I keep thinking Harrison Harris, which is such Thomas Harrison. Thomas Harris. Thomas Harris. Thomas Harris and Jeff Lindsay are both able to convey these things so well because they're experts at their craft. Much like Stephen King, again, absolutely. And they practice every damn day. And this is how they reach those levels. They are dedicated to the craft.
And the thing that's helped me with my writing over the last couple of years is feedback from editors. As much as we sort of think, oh, you want to stay clear of editors, it's necessary, and they may be brutal, they might hurt your feelings, but they do so in a way that it's constructive. And I think if you're open to that feedback, and I know myself that my first versions of my manuscripts were pretty rough, and I thought they were polished, because when you're reading your own words over and over again, you start to miss things and you miss patterns. And when someone comes in with fresh eyes and does that editing, they'll tell you need to cut this out. You're using too many redundant words. You need to start at the point of most tension. Start your book at the action scene, and you don't want a slow build up. All these techniques and all this advice that you'll get from editors, and then once you read a manuscript that's been professionally edited, you can then start you can start to apply the same editing techniques to your own manuscripts, and then you become a much better self-editor as well.
Yes.
So I really can't stress enough the importance of getting feedback from either beta readers, but certainly from a professional editor. They'll pick up on things that other people won't pick up on.
I think you are the 5th person I've interviewed for this year's series so far that has said the exact same thing. It is crucial to get a good editor. How many editors have you been through? And how did you decide that your current editor, if they are, is the right one for you?
I started with beta readers, and I started with editors that were probably just breaking in. They probably weren't professional editors. They were competent, but probably not so experienced. It wasn't until I kind of had my breakthrough moment where a manuscript I wrote came second in a writing competition through Hawkeye Publishing. It's their annual manuscript prize. Yeah, thank you. And as a result of that, I was offered a traditional publishing contract, but part of that was to work with a structural editor. So Lauren Daniels is a fantastic editor that a lot of people in Southeast Queensland would probably know. She did a structural edit first, and that's where she looked at more globally the storyline and gaps or redundant scenes or chapters or even redundant characters, characters that weren't driving the story forward. So that was that kind of the macro view of how can we bang this manuscript into shape and get your story more concise. And then we work with another editor who then started doing line editing, and then even someone else who did proofreading. So it was kind of like a team of editors to get it to a point that it was polished enough, ready to go to print. So there were definitely different stages of that editing process.
The stages of editing is something like I don't think people realize what they're paying for when they pay for a professional editor. They think someone's just going through with a red pen and taking out what they think are grammatical errors and putting in commas. But when you do a proper edit, not only are they able to give you exactly that, they're able to be like, okay, these characters not working. Like that's not them. Or as what's happened with me, if I've had to write something and then 6 months later I'll finish it, is my editor will say, okay, this character's voice has changed dramatically. You need to go back and decide which one you want. So there's that. They'll do the grammatical stuff. They'll make sure your sentences are structured correctly. They'll make sure that you don't have multiple sentences starting with the same word. Like you won't have 5 sentences in a row starting with the or him or I. And unless that's exactly what the pattern is required to do. If you want to slow down the pacing really fast, you put several sentences with the same word in. Then they'll go through, they'll make sure that there's consistency with the work. So like I said, with the characters, but also with the landscape, with the descriptions that you've used. Then they go through the story edits where they're making sure that everything again is consistent, but there's flow, that it's hitting the right story beats. Like they do so much more than just put extra commas in and change your sentences around.
And they'll challenge you. They'll pose to you propositions about, what if we did this, or could this character do this, or could we change this character's, where they're coming from. After my first structural edit, and it was about an 82,000 word manuscript, and we'd culled 6,000 words from that manuscript. And I thought, there's a saying, kill your darlings. And part of that was killing off scenes, although I felt they were nicely written. The editor said, look, this slows your story down. It doesn't progress your plot. Is it necessary? I thought, well, I laboured over this for days. I love that scene. Well, does it drive your story forward? You have to be very pragmatic about it. And I said, well, it probably doesn't. It's nice wording and nice prose, but it probably doesn't drive the story forward. So we got rid of it. Kept it, parts of it were able to reuse and other parts. But with that extra word count, because the 80,000 word was what we were striving for, it gave me room then to add extra depth to other characters, or to improve dialogue. To improve scenes, and by culling some of the rubbish in the first cull, I was then able to add some extra quality, and then I started coming up with some fresh ideas and added some threads throughout. So it was like a subplot that started to creep in, only because I'd given it, the editor had given me room to move by getting rid of extraneous wording to come back and add quality.
It just made me think of pruning citrus. The way that you prune citrus trees is you cut out the middle. You cut this huge chunk out of the middle, and it might be laden with fruit, but you have to cut it out. Otherwise, sunlight is not going to get throughout the entire tree. And you don't have space to have a good story. You don't have space to have good fruit. So that's what that sounded. That's what you just made me think of just then.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I might borrow that one.
That's you got to. The way you prune citrus is to cut out the middle. Yeah. This is fantastic. Honestly, I think I could talk. Mystery is my thing. I absolutely love it. I crave it all the time, and it's the one genre I will actually still stop to read paperback form. Normally, I tell myself I don't have time, so it's audiobook everything. But mystery, I want to just keep it in my head for as long as possible. So I will always stop and read a paperback mystery. Now, have we missed anything? Let me have a look here. I think that's good for now, because there's a lot of stuff here. Oh, you've been you've written with Harry Colfer before. We had him on last year.
Yeah, Harry and I have collaborated on a few different projects, and we've been beta readers for each other's work and giving each other feedback. And we're currently putting together our own podcast series. So Harry, myself, and another Brisbane author, Bryn, the three of us have started, and we just dropped our first 2 episodes. It's called the Genre Fiction Podcast, and we've been sort of spamming everyone via our socials and websites. So it's out there. And basically what that is, because he's a paramedic who writes crime from the perspective of a paramedic.
I have his 2 books here. They're on my fiction to read pile.
Yeah, they're a great read. I've read both of those and actually gave feedback during the early writing of the manuscripts.
Incredible.
So what we do is in our podcast series, we're talking all things genre fiction, but our common ground is crime or mystery writing, and talking about how our respective expertise. Myself as a police officer, Bryn he works in he's got military experience, also working for federal government, and that factors into his writing with his kind of sort of anti-corruption, sort of really complex kind of crime plots, and Harrow again writing through the perspective of a paramedic. So what we do is we kind of cross-pollinating ideas and talking about how our experiences can help other writers in terms of making sure that their writing is procedurally correct and providing sort of factual information to help other writers.
Oh, that is so fascinating. And honestly, again, you've just emphasized the same point that we've had hammered home this entire thing is your writing journey needs other people as part of it. You need to be able to I can speak. This is my sixth interview for today. um, you've got to be able to collaborate with other writers and step out of your own ego and learn from people, seek that knowledge and be curious about what other people's experiences are, because it does nothing but enhance your own writing. It's such a powerful thing to do, and having those critique groups, I think for me in particular, my writing improved exponentially over the last 5 years because I entered into the writing community. I wasn't withheld. I didn't stay back away. I didn't just sit back and publish my own stuff. I got out there and I read things and I spoke with people and I took that feedback. And it improves your writing so much more to have a circle of people around you. And there's so many people in Logan and Southeast Queensland, all the way south of Brisbane, all the way through to Tweed. They're hungry writers, and they want people around them. They want that community, because writers understand writers. We get when there's common issues.
Yeah, and writing, as you know, writing is it's a lonely business. We spend a lot of time by ourselves and in front of the computer screens or notepads writing, and that networking is really valuable. Even if you're having doubts, or we all share the same fears and doubts about, can I really do this? Am I good enough? And just to be able to lean on other writers and to compare ideas, I think it's so valuable to be involved in networking, whether it's a local writers group or whatever it might be.
Yeah, we're not alone. We're definitely not alone. So many people have a story to tell, and the people that are brave enough to tell it are not alone. We can be knights together, knights of the pen and page.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Jack. This has been absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to chat more at the Writers' Festival on the 9th and 10th of June. Now, what was the name of your podcast again, so people can go and check out the first 2 episodes?
It's called the Genre Fiction Podcast.
All right, the Genre Fiction Podcast.
On my Jack Roney Instagram and Facebook, I've been sharing it, as well as Harry Colfer and Bryn Smith, who are my collaborators with that podcast. And really, as I said, we're sharing our combined knowledge base, and a lot of times we're just chewing the fat and bouncing around ideas, and it's very organic. We don't have a script. We just kind of chat, just like what you and I have done today. We have an idea. We have a topic for each episode. Last episode, we were talking about what defines a trope in crime writing, and we kind of looked at that. We talked about what our own personal writing journey was, and then we've already pre-recorded a whole bunch of episodes, which will be dropping every Monday. So I think we've already recorded 10 episodes, and we identified what were the topics that, in particular, crime or other sort of thriller or fiction genre writers would be interested in. So we're confident that if you tune in, you'll get something out of our discussions.
Oh, that's so exciting! I'll have to tune in. I'm a big podcast person, so that suits me fine. Awesome.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Jack, and we will see you on the 9th and 10th of June at the Logan Writers Festival.
Thanks, Ryan. I really look forward to joining you and others at the Writers Festival.
Excellent. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.